Hello and welcome back to Talking Teens Official. I'm Nural and thank you for joining me and for your listening ears. I really appreciate it. This week we have a very special guest on our podcast for you and his name is Daniel Halls. Daniel is an ER nurse and he's been a nurse for 15 years and in a management role currently. And he is building a school community and a program in the real world for human skills matter. I'm not sure whether I have given you enough credit with that intro, Dan, so feel free to correct me on anything there, but lovely to have you here.
Thanks, Nural. Thanks for having me on. Exciting times.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about what you're working on at the moment.
Yeah, so in my management role during COVID times, I had a senior group of nurses and during that time, they really struggled with giving feedback, having challenging conversations, just, the things that is in their title, they weren't really getting much practice with. And especially during COVID when everything was quite hot and heavy all the time, I decided to make a program within my cohort of senior nurses. And over a 2-year period, I probably presented to over 300 to 400 other nurses in my organization. And then one person on one of the days said, "Do you do any of this external?" And I went, "No, I don't know if anyone's interested." They're like, "You need to start going external with this stuff because this is valuable. Your stories and what you offer could be resonating with other people." So in January last year, I took the leap of faith and got a business. I got an ABN and I created my own website and my business, Daniel Halls Co., and made my tagline, "Make Human Skills Matter." So from there, I've just been helping people, more emerging leaders, similar to the cohort that I had in my department, talking about, everyday leadership, how to give feedback, how to receive feedback better, how to manage challenging conversations, ways to help with resilience, because it's just something that people kind of don't quite understand. Resilience, a lot of people think is just get up and move on, whereas you've got to kind of recognize what's happening before you can move on. So that's one thing that I really focus on. And just getting people back to being a little bit more emotionally intelligent with themselves, being aware of what's happening within themselves and how do you manage it. So that's where I've been over the last 18 months now. I've made a school community where I've met you and a lot of other like-minded people and starting to build on that as well. And today we're here to help our emerging leaders, our teens who are going to be looking after us one day, how they can be better versions of themselves essentially, and how are they going to navigate the real world once they go into adulthood.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things that I think teenagers need to be aware of. And I think with the way technology is actually going at the moment, I think it's going to be really important for them to have those human skills. I think a lot of reliance on technology is taking that away. And I feel like it's coming back, though. I feel like that's the only way that we're going to future-proof our teens coming through the schools or going into the real world is if they actually have those human skills, the creativity, the problem solving, the adaptability and the resilience to be able to change and grow very quickly. But that can be really challenging too. So what do you think would be the biggest thing or the biggest change that needs to happen from what you've seen, like working in the hospital system with teenagers coming through? Where are they really lacking right now, do you feel, and from what you see, and what can be done to improve that, do you think?
Well, like you just touched on there, I think the generation that are coming through now, their life has always had technology. Us that are a little bit older, there's been a part of our life where we just had a phone in the room, in the lounge room, and that was the only way that we communicate with people outside our home. Otherwise, people had to come visit us, so we had to visit people. Now, you can literally tap an app, and somebody's going to be in front of you. I made a blog about this the other day with my organization. Pre-COVID, we used to have meetings with people in a room, and we got all the information that needed to be put out. But the thing that I found the most beneficial with all of that was the conversation, those natural conversations that just happened in a 20-meter walk down the hallway. I learned more about anybody in that 20, 30, 40 seconds walking to the lift than what I would on any Teams chat now. Because I get told what I need to say, I say it, you mute it, I move on. So natural conversations don't happen online because people can essentially mute you, which stops all natural conversations. So I think the generation that are coming through, and I think COVID probably showed that a lot as well, was you don't have classroom chats because you were on a screen looking at a teacher and was essentially put on mute and didn't really have much communication with other people. So even those little cheeky chats in between, questions being asked at school weren't happening. And now you're seeing kids who feel very awkward talking to people because that natural skill that was happening in class was taken away from them. The kids that were still able to go to school probably had more benefit because they were still having that people to people interaction. Like smelling someone's breath is a unique thing. Then you're there, you can touch them, you can put them on the shoulder. When things got emotional, you could regulate with each other. If you're getting overwhelmed and frustrated on the screen and you're essentially out of your lane, you can just be muted. And how do you regulate when you've got nothing to regulate, no one to regulate with? So I've seen in recent times with social medias, there's lots of group and communities where people are meeting in real life, and schools trying to do that as well, where people are meeting up and doing something. So like there's lots of jogger clubs out there now. Like in Melbourne, we have the fun run, 5K fun runs every Saturday. Like they're getting quite big on social media and people are meeting, they'd rather meet up and go for a run than chat with people online. So I think we're in this bit of a paradigm shift with social media where people are starting to want or have the need to be meeting in real life more often again. So I think human connection's the biggest thing that our teenage generation are going to need because you can't beat it. There's no like AI. You can AI at the moment. I mean, we could stipulate and think what's going to happen, but at the moment, there's no answer with AI to replace human connection.
Yeah, I think I think you hit the nail right on the head there. I think you started talking about COVID and things like that, and my mind went back to my remote teaching days during COVID, and oh my God, it was hard. It was hard from a teacher perspective, and it was hard from a student perspective. But when you mentioned the walking down the hallway and having a chat with someone just 20 seconds before jumping into the lift, that was actually, I saw that from a classroom perspective as a maths teacher as well. That consequential learning for our kids wasn't there during those times, and we were locked down for a while. So the kind of things where they would just be sitting next to someone and they just look over and they go, "How'd you do that on your calculator?" Or, "How'd you get that answer? What'd you do?" And then the kid next to them would say, "Oh, you just push this button." You go like this. That was gone because they weren't next to each other. Those interactions weren't there. So when we came back into the school system from remote learning, that was a big shift for those kids who started in 2020, in particular in high school, who started, they didn't know how to do that, and they didn't know that they could do that. So a lot of them struggled coming back in to the system to have people next to them, and then the realization that, oh, hang on a sec, I can't go and do whatever I want at recess or whatever. I have to actually sit down and kind of listen and work with the people around me because they weren't doing it during COVID. As you said, it was just all online. Another thing I wanted to touch on there is probably the mental health issues as well, and maybe the links that come into the human skills there. Like I'm sure you've seen a lot of things being an emergency, working in an emergency department with mental health issues and kids coming through. I see the start of it, you might see the end of it type of thing, and, more extreme cases coming through. So if there was a parent out there who was worried about their kids, like mental health, for instance, or their social interactions or their emotional intelligence, what advice would you give them if they were concerned and didn't know what to do, what to say, or how to help? What would you say to them?
All right. I'm going to share a story with you. So last year, when I first started my business, I was connected with a man who was a Sparky. His wife essentially told him, "You're not very emotionally intelligent. You need to go get help." And our paths crossed. Don't know how, just managed to cross. He has two boys who are 13 and 15, I think. And when I did my pre-questions with him, I said, "What do you want to get out of this?" Like, we're both new at this stuff. I never did one-to-one coaching. So I said, "What do you want?" And I'll try and mold something to help you. And he goes, "I want to be a little bit more connected with my kids." And he goes, "I have a short fuse and I don't know how to manage it," and that, going through all of that. So the first session I had with him was talking about emotional intelligence and self-awareness and self-regulation. And after that, he was able to kind of manage his emotions a little more. And then one topic I was talking about was, it's in my school community. It's called uncommon connections. So it's just using questions that have a little bit more of an emotional connection to it. So, for example, rather than "How was your weekend?" we get the typical "Oh, it was all right." You change that question to "What made you smile on the weekend?" You'll see the person go, "Oh, wow, I went out for lunch with my friend and I had a lot of fun and we had a good chat and I haven't seen him for a while." And then you can see you now got 5 different ways to go that conversation. So I said to him, I said, "Well, what do you do with your boys a lot?" He goes, "We drive a lot for sport." I said, "Okay." I said, "What do you ask questions in the car about?" He goes, "Normally they're just sitting on their tablet because I'll ask them how their day was and they're like, 'Yeah, good.'" So I said, "Well, why don't you change the question to what made you laugh at school today?" And he goes, "Okay, I'll use it." And then the next week we caught up. I said, "How'd the weekend go with the boys?" He goes, "Yeah, good, actually really good." I said, "Oh, what happened?" And he said, "Well, I asked my eldest, what made you laugh at school today?" And he said that he turned off his tablet, he put it down, and then he was like, "Oh, my friend Harry, he did this thing that was really funny," and just went on this whole story. And I said, "Well, how'd that resonate?" He goes, "Didn't even know he had a friend named Harry." And I'm like, "So you've learned this whole story and this whole narrative of this kid, Harry, that you never would have had if you didn't ask that question?" He goes, "No." So I think with parents, you need to hit their emotions. So use curiosity. I mean, if you're stuck with a question, Google it. Give me an emotional question to this. And you'll see that your kids the cogs will go over because you remember emotions more than what people say. Your brain, the limbic system of your brain is more prehistoric than your prefrontal cortex. You remember emotions better, whether it's good or bad. So when you bring that emotional side of a question in, your kids will just love it because they'll be able to open up in ways because they've gone on that emotional sort of pathway. They're just going to keep talking because it's on their ego. It's focused on building their ego, which is what you want. You want confident kids. They need an ego. That comes from emotion. So by giving that emotional sort of cue to say, "Tell me what made you smile. Tell me what made you sad," label the emotion, the kids are going to be more open to explain it, not "How you're feeling," because that's confusing. You have to put a label on it. So if you think that they're feeling sad, you go, "Are you feeling sad?" They're going to be able to go, "Yeah, I understand that emotion a little bit more. I can talk about it." So that's something that I found. And with mental health patients working in an emergency department, that's the pathway I go down. I see you're frustrated. Can we dive into that? I see you're really sad. Or people who are bipolar and very elevated, you go, "You're really happy today. What's going on?" And then you can kind of go into the conversation and figure out what's going on in their mind at that time. And that's how I can get the best out of my assessment for mental health patients, is by focusing on that emotional side of where they're at. So that would be my biggest, and that's something that I need to start working on with my kids. I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old, and in a blink of an eye, they're going to be preteen, teen. And that's the conversations that I feel is going to have the better outcomes for me, is going on that emotional route.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so true. You hit the nail on the head by saying, people don't always remember the words you told them or you said to them, but they'll always remember how they felt. So by asking those questions, and it's funny, I ask my kids the same questions, but sometimes I flip it. Sometimes I'll flip it. I'll say to them, "All right, so nothing made nothing made them laugh today." I'm like, "All right, now tell me something funny your teacher did. Surely your teachers have a sense of humor. One of them being a bit of a doofus. Like, what were they doing? Like trying to get you guys in, or what was the most boring thing at school today that you did? Like, there's some boring classes, right? They
Yeah.
find some of them boring. So
Yeah.
tapping into that, I find also generates a conversation. Yeah, so that's really interesting. So can you tell me a little bit more about what else you feel parents might need to help support their kids from your perspective?
Well, similar to what we were talking about last week, Nural, like your kids go through a lot of life changes in relative to a whole life very quick. You're going through primary school, you get to grade 6, you're itch shitting a bit, and then you go to year 7 and the whole world's changed. That's big. Plus mine, and let's not even get into the hormonal changes that are happening, and all the other life stresses that is happening in the background. Going from being top dog to puppy again is a big deal. And then they have to navigate through another 6 years of school. The thing that I find that parents may need to start focusing on when they're years 10, 11, is that when they get to year 12 and that's a tough year in itself, getting through exams and getting the best score they can, they're now going into the real world. And the difference between the real world and year 7 is there's not as many teachers to hold your hand. You're on your own, essentially. The real world is in kind. So I think a couple of skills that I always find that are going to be very helpful in helping people move forward is curiosity. You finish year 12 and you think you should know everything. The reality is, unfortunately, you don't. And that's okay, because life is a lesson. You've taught all these school subjects, but how much life experience have you had? Unless you've been in a position where you've gone overseas and you've tried a whole heap of different cultures, or you've worked a job. Like some kids don't have the time to have a job, because so having a job is a big deal. You'll learn so many skills from working within a team or whatever, even if you work individual, you learn skills as you go, you figure it out and you move on. In the real world, when you're working and you have a job and you have a boss who's telling you what to do, if you don't know, am I doing this right? Am I doing it wrong? Can you show me a better way to do it? Or how do you do it so I can learn from you? Two things happen there. If you say, can you show me how to do it? Someone's going to show you how to do it. Well, there's not many people in the world who go, no, get stuff. I'm not doing it. Especially in the trade industry, they're going to show you how to do it because they're like, I'm going to show you how to do it properly because you're going to be doing my job one day. So I need you to know how to do it properly. And I want you to get it right. So if I have to show you 5, 10, 100 times to do the task, at least I know that you're going to do it properly. The other thing is, if you don't understand things, asking, I don't get that. Can you simplify it for me so I understand? People will generally try and do that. It's a good thing for people that are experienced in a role to kind of simplify things, because if you work in customer service or any other working with other people, knowing how to simplify the language is actually beneficial for them too, because customers don't know all your ins and out language. So it's actually a good skill to be able to simplify complicated things. So curiosity is a very, very good skill. And one that I've been doing a lot lately in my workshops is receiving feedback. So I think any parent, anyone in the history of the universe has probably had someone who's given feedback and the response is either, I know, or yeah, but. the skill that I want people to learn when you start getting feedback is your first word needs to be a breath. Don't say anything. Because somebody's telling you something in feedback, the first thing your brain does is treats it as a threat. So you want to give a response. So by not saying anything for 4, 5, 6 seconds and saying thank you sets you up in a better stead, because you're going to be able to take more of the information in than going, yeah, I know, or yeah, but. Because people end up not wanting to give you feedback because they're like, well, I'm just talking to a brick wall because I've just said something and they've said I know when they clearly don't. So pause, say thank you, and then be curious. Okay, well, how would you do it? Can you show me? And invite that person in. So if someone's going to give you feedback, they have a responsibility to help you. If they're going to take the time to tell you that something needs to change, they also need to be able to hold your hand a bit through that journey. And that's something I do in nursing all the time. If someone wants feedback, I'll go, this is the feedback, and this is how we're going to improve on it together. So you're taking on that sort of coaching role, which is a skill in itself. Like, there's skills that you're not routinely trying. It's not like playing a guitar and you practice every night and you do it. In the real world, feedback and conflict, they're all very challenging things to do on their own, and you're not practicing it enough. So seek to understand what's going on, saying thank you. Sometimes feedback, it's not all relative. Okay. There's some things that might be true and there's some things that you can just disregard. So you need to take a moment to reflect and be like, well, what's relevant to me right now? Okay. And you just take it away and then you just take notes on it and move on. Some things you can just leave on the shelf, and that's okay. You don't have to take it. If we took everybody's feedback on everything, we'd be broken humans because it's just too much happening. And then from there, once you've gathered all the information in your head, you decide on what you need to do next. Okay, well, what is the information that I can take and how can I improve on myself to make myself a better version of myself?
Yeah, no, that's really great. And I think even listening to you talk, I can hear the language and what's needed with our kids, because a lot of times when people are receiving feedback, they're actually listening to it, but what's actually going on in their brain, and what I work with a lot of times is, you might be listening to what I'm saying, but your brain's already formulated your response. So that's all you're thinking of. You're not taking in actually anything what I'm saying. So I'm going to give you time to think about a response, but you need to hear what I'm saying first, and then I'm going to stop, and then you're going to have a bit of time to respond. So sometimes when I'm giving feedback, I'll actually tell people that I'm going to give you time. I just please want you to listen to my words first, and then I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to give you a minute to have a think and think about what you want to say back, because I want you to say something back there. So I find things like that can be really helpful. Otherwise, people just sit there nodding their head, going, because they're waiting for you to stop talking so they can jump in and tell you what an asshole you've been, or something like that. So I've found that has been really, really helpful over the years as well. Yeah, well, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think the thing that I find with the more that I'm doing in these workshops is that giving and receiving feedback are skills that are underutilized. Like, they're not being done enough. So when it actually comes to crunch time, they're not going in with a narrative. Like, that's the biggest problem. And this is for all the audiences, is who has been in a situation where you're going to give feedback to someone and you think you're going to say A, and then the person's going to say B, and then you're going to walk away saying C, right? That never happens, because you say something that indirectly attacks the amygdala to that person's brain. They're in an emotional response straight away. So they're not listening to what you're saying. Your brain's like, this is a threat and I need to figure a way out. Okay. So like you said, I'm going to give you feedback is enough to level the playing field, because somebody's then, okay, I'm going to set myself to have it. A lot of people you'll see a lot of feedback is you do this. As soon as you say you do that, that's an automatic response in the brain going, that's a threat to me. In my ego, my personal space, it's an attack. So the part of the brain that needs to be registering what you're saying is shut down. So going in saying, hey, this is going to be a tough conversation, or this isn't comfortable for me either, because it's not comfortable saying things that might hurt someone's feelings. But we've all heard the saying, cruel to be kind. You need to be direct with people sometimes. And anyone that gives feedback, you need to keep the language simple. You need to be slow. So pausing is a great skill in that, because it gives them time to receive what you've said. A lot of people will go, the other day you did this, and then you did this, and then you did this, and this, and I think you need to do this. Well, they've just heard the first thing. They've forgotten the other 4 points. Same with the feedback sandwich. Sometimes people get it a bit mixed up. So the feedback sandwich, it's, positive. We want some reinforcements and positive again. A lot of people make too much bread, right? They really pump someone's tires and give them all these good things they've done, a little bit of mayo in there, and then this skinniest piece of ham or, veggie patty, right? It's so skinny. And that's the most important part. But then they finish with this big compliment. So then they've walked away going, I'm in it's shit in a bit and I'm doing a good job. But they've missed the middle part. So when the feedback sandwich comes in, I have no problem with it. You just need to use some flatbread on either side and use a bit more of a patty in the middle. You can soften the blow a bit, but you need to give that meat.
Yeah, that applies to kids as well, I think, in schools and classrooms. But I've also found, I don't know if you found this, I've also found this also applies to parents of kids that I've worked with who I can see something they need to improve on in dealing with their own child. And I'm well aware that straight away they're on the back foot, because who am I to tell them how to parent their kid, right? So when that sandwich comes into play, I use it a lot, but I use it a lot from the point of view that it's the kid is a reflection of what's going on with them, because a lot of the times I think the issues I deal with, the kids have issues, but that the parents also have issues as well that need to be dealt with, and very delicately giving the parent that feedback is really tricky sometimes. Like, I know your kid's like this, but I can kind of see why, because you're like this. You know what I mean? It's a bit, it can be a little bit tricky sometimes there from that point of view. Is there anything else with regards to what parents can do for their kids and their teenagers to help understand them, to help communicate with them, to help grow with them or feel connected with them, that you might suggest from your point of view?
It's kind of alludes to what you just said just before about, giving feedback. I suppose Stephen Covey says this, start with the end in mind. Okay. So what's your goal? So like you said, you've got a kid's behavior, right? That's challenging. The end goal is that we want this outcome, right? So one thing you can do with the feedback sandwich is you can open with, this is what we want to achieve for your son or daughter. Okay. This behavior is interrupting school. It's interrupting classwork. They're probably not as engaged as they should be. We want to improve that. Okay. So by focusing, and you can do this with your kids, of like, well, what's your goals in life? Ask them, what makes you happy? Sometimes that's enough to just kind of get those conversations going. Are you really enjoying the sport you're playing, or are you just doing it to make us happy? Do you really like doing those electives, or is it just because you're doing it because you want to? Do you still really like? Because in year 10, I wanted to be a forensic scientist, and then in year 12, I didn't know what I wanted to be in life. I got a C in forensic science in year 10, so I said I'm not going to be a forensic scientist anymore. Like, when I was in year 12, my goal was, even if I can get an answer score to get into uni, I'll do whatever. If I think, looking back, if my mum was like, well, what do you really want? What's your goal? It probably would have changed my trajectory a little bit. Like those questions weren't asked. It was just kind of like, you go into school, do the best you can. You know, my mum didn't really push too much, but, you know, every parent's different. But, you know, if you figure out what your kid wants, then that holds them accountable. Putting the ball in their court and then guiding them that direction is probably the best way that I probably would have benefited from a bit more. Like if I knew what my end goal was and mum kept me to that pathway, then that probably would have held me in better stead when I was studying at school. Another thing is, like, you got to be mindful that the kid's brain, like your teenager's brain's developing so much. And, you know, there's a lot of parents who they have them in sports, they have a job, they're doing all the studies. Some kids do extra study. They need a moment to rest. So it's okay to maybe miss a training session one day and just chill out on the couch. That's okay. Like their brains need to reset sometimes. If they keep going on a hamster wheel over time, they're slowly burning at both ends. And they're not going to want to say, I'm burnt out, because in their minds, they don't want to disappoint anybody. You know, they have a coach, they want to let the coach down. They don't want to let the teachers down. They don't want to miss school because they don't want to let their friends down. Like it's all, their mind is, I don't want to let anybody down. You can't give from an empty cup, essentially. And your kid's cup can empty quite quickly if they've got so many commitments to things. So sometimes is everything okay? Do you feel tired? If they go, yes, let them rest. That, you know, they're going to be up, you know, I was the same as a teenager. You're probably the same, up at stupid hours of the night just because we could. And then they're getting up early and go to school. Like they're burnt out on Monday and they still got to get through a whole week. So maybe you can have a mental health day now and again. It's actually okay. Like businesses around the world now are putting out more funding to allow people to have mental health day. Kids' brains are more vulnerable than an adult's. So you need to give them a bit of time to rest.
And don't overload them. I've talked about this one a little bit before. It actually sits a bit close to me. There are a lot of parents out there who feel like they're doing a fantastic job by taking their kids and enrolling them into all these extracurricular activities, and the kids are just tired. They're tired and they're hungry a lot of the times. They need a good, decent food. They need nutrition. They need protein. They need the fruit. They need the veggies. And when you're running from extracurricular activity to activity, sometimes the quality of the food will slip as well, unless you're really conscious of meal prepping, which is hard work for some parents as well. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important, is giving the kids downtime. They do need downtime, especially as they're growing. Yeah.
When they've got so much screen time.
I think this has been a really, really good chat. And Dan, I think this has been great. Thank you. Did you want to give your community and your website a little bit of a plug, and we can work it in there, and I can put links into the show notes with you for you as well? Tell us a little bit about your school community.
Yeah, so my school community is called Make Human Skills Matter on School. It's, I've just got a whole heap of classroom resources about talking about emotional intelligence, uncommon connections. So just asking random questions that kind of build more of an emotional sort of connection with people, how to manage conflict, how to deal with feedback, setting up boundaries as well is something that's a big thing that a lot of people struggle with. So I've started to make some content about that. And open forum. So you got any questions you can post. And there's a lot of smart people out there, including yourself, Nural, that can offer support to people, and it's completely free. I haven't got anything charged there currently. I've also been starting to do a bit of a blog. Substack's kind of my thing at the moment, so I'll share the link with my Substack page, and offering some blogs on different views of human skills in workplaces and in life in general. And my business, Dan Hall's Co. I do workshops for businesses, small businesses, big businesses. I'll do keynote speaking as well on human skills stuff. So if your business feels like it needs a bit of a booster in mental health and human skills, feel free to reach out and we can have a chat.
Fantastic. Oh, thanks for that, Dan. I look forward to watching your journey and see how you grow as well, and how your business and how everything grows. Thank you for coming on and having a chat.
Absolute pleasure, Nural. Thank you so much.